There is a very bittersweet feeling in finding something in life that has been sitting there literally for decades, only for you to consistently overlook it because you don't feel like it's your cup of tea. Then you find it one day and you realize, this is fantastic. What a breath of fresh air. And all that time, you could have had this in your life, enjoying it consistently. The Reuben, for example. For the sake of brevity, though, today's discussion centers around 1983's Christine, directed by horror royalty John Carpenter. Let's talk about it. With Stephen King penning this story and John Carpenter directing it, you just know we've got to be in for a hell of a ride. In the opening credits, we hear an engine revving before we arrive in 1957 Detroit in an assembly line of automobiles, all of them looking identical until we get to a cherry red beauty that we would come to know and love as Christine. Now, as soon as we meet her, Christine starts doling out punishment because one of the guys working there is checking Christine's engine. He's got the hood up, he's looking inside of it, and the hood slams down on the dude's hand, causing quite a bit of damage because he gets carried away with a bloody stump. Now, there's a guy off to the side watching this whole thing unfold, and he decides to climb behind the wheel of Christine, smoking a cigar, cranking the radio, enjoying himself. But the next time he's seen, car door opens and this dude falls out of it dead. I don't know what happened to him inside that car, but he didn't make it out alive. Jumping on ahead a couple of decades, we meet our nerdy little lead Arnie and his popular jock buddy Dennis. Unfortunately, we get a lot of Arnie's mom in this scene. She's obnoxious, she's overbearing, and we're going to do the very best we can not to talk about her here. But on the way to school, in Dennis's very nice car, boys will be boys, and they have a conversation that's a shade on the crude side in the fact that they are seniors now, and Dennis is making it his sole goal to get Arnie laid. They go through the roster of potential candidates for Arnie, and he doesn't seem impressed by any of them. Speaking of girls, though, how did I not know in all these years that Kelly Preston was in this movie? Kelly Preston, rest in peace, but Kelly Preston was a fantastic actress, and she was absolutely gorgeous. She's here, and Dennis could really care less because she is all about him, and he just seems bored with her altogether. In addition to her, the high school boys all about sprain their necks when Lee comes into the picture. Now, she's the new girl in town. She's new to the school, obviously, and she is played by the stunning Alexandra Paul. And I have to be honest, I underestimated Alexandra Paul. All those years on Baywatch, I'd always tend to ignore her for the enhanced blondes on that show, and she is absolutely remarkably beautiful in this movie. Dennis happens upon Arnie in auto shop class a little bit later, getting bullied by a group of kids. Led by Buddy and a bunch of cronies, these guys are tormenting Arnie. They snatch his lunch. Buddy ends up pulling a switchblade because all the tough guys back in the 80s had a switchblade. They wind up cutting into Arnie's lunch, spilling it all over the place, knocking Arnie to the ground, and even going as far as stepping on Arnie's glasses, breaking them. Now, this, of course, leads to poor Arnie having to use tape to hold his eyeglasses together. That's going to make it a lot harder for the kid to get laid. But those bullies being in this movie, you sort of want those type of people in this movie because you really can't wait for something bad to happen to them. Now, on the way home, though, with Dennis, that's when things really start to take a turn because Arnie spots a torn down red Plymouth off in the tall grass with a for sale sign on it, and he sees stars. He makes Dennis pull over. Owner comes out. They have a conversation. Come to find out he only wants $250 for the car, and the car happens to have a name. Christine, of course. And Dennis does the best he can to talk his buddy out of buying that hunk of junk because it is in rough shape. Arnie hears nothing but the sound in his mind of the engine when he fixes his car up and buys the car on site. Prophetically, Dennis tells him, "Okay, buddy, it's your funeral." Arnie's mom is a big old bitch about this car, refusing to get it registered, and she won't even let Arnie park it at the house. So Arnie's got to take it to a local garage run by a surly old man and keep it there during the restoration project. And this old man, he's kind of a prick, but there again, you can see he's kind of trying to like Arnie. Back on Girl Watch at the high school, the boys are all trying to figure out a way to ask Lee out, much to the chagrin of Kelly Preston's character, because they bypass her and go straight to Lee. Maybe it's the new girl vibe, I'm not really sure. In the 80s, Kelly Preston was a 20 out of 10. But Dennis decides to shoot a shot, and he misses wildly. And we can't figure out, or at least it's not readily known to us, why she turns him down so swiftly, but we learn about it a little bit later in the film. Now, as far as Christine goes, the more time Arnie spends with this car, restoring it, the more obsessed he becomes, and the more he slowly starts to change. You know, his demeanor changes, his attitude towards other people changes. He stops wearing his glasses at one point. He's blowing off plans with all of his friends. His mother, mean as she is, and she's awful, she decides to investigate a little bit because the change in her son is alarming, and comes to find out that the last owner of the car died in the car of carbon monoxide poisoning, and that's after that owner's 5-year-old daughter choked to death in the car. Dennis decides to do a little bit of searching on this thing as well. And when he confronts the guy that sold it to Arnie, that guy confesses he tried to make his brother get rid of the car numerous times. And when he finally did talk his brother into ditching Christine, that car made it back 3 weeks later, presumably all on its own. Dennis is a great character in this movie, and you root for him because he's popular, he's athletic, but he's not a dick, and he's really genuinely cares about Arnie. And unfortunately, Dennis has an accident on the football field, but when he does, we're starting to see Arnie step his game up in a big way, because he shows up to the football game with Lee on his arm. They're making out in front of anybody that has a set of eyes, and he's driving a cherry red, beautifully restored Christine, and everybody's head turns not only at the girl, but at the car as well. New as that relationship may be, Lee has an issue with how much time Arnie spends on his car and with his car. And at a drive-in, when they're having that argument inside of Christine, Arnie steps out, Lee goes to take a bite of her sandwich, the doors lock, and Lee starts to choke to death on that food. Now Arnie can't get inside, and Lee is dying right in front of his eyes. Fortunately, there's a good Samaritan close by. He's able to get the doors open, helps Lee, clears her airways. Even after that incident, Arnie's growing more and more delusional about this car, and Lee wants nothing to do with it. She doesn't want to get back in Christine. She refuses. She demands Arnie gets rid of this car. Arnie drops a cold, crazy, out of nowhere line on her that he thinks she's just sexually frustrated. I mean, what a line, and what a dumb decision to make when you're talking to your girlfriend. But just when you think Arnie's night can't get any worse, after all that, Buddy and his band of misfits break into the garage where Arnie's keeping Christine, and they do a number on this car. Windshields are busted, the body is dented with sledgehammers, they take knives and they carve up the leather interior. Car gets absolutely brutalized. To Arnie, this is like a death in the family. It causes him to snap completely on Lee. His parents catch the brunt of it as well, and he starts to spiral into just an insane rage over what has happened to his car. Now he's sitting there in a tender moment with his vehicle. He's telling Christine, I'm going to make it all better. I'm going to get this all fixed. This is a great scene because Arnie can sort of sense there's more to this car than meets the eye, if you catch my drift. And he steps back and he says, okay, show me. This car, all by itself, begins to round back into form. Dents are getting popped out. Before you know it, in a matter of minutes, this thing is back to showroom ready. Now, if I saw my car doing this, I would make lemonade in my pants, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Christine, though, makes it a goal to find the culprits that threw her this beating and dispatch of them one by one. Now, I got to give it to Keith Gordon, who plays Arnie in this film. Once he finally gives in to Christine's murderous impulses, he makes Arnie very chilling for the rest of this movie. Very, very strong character work. We get a great scene at the service station where Christine winds up taking out the final 3 members of the auto shop crew that were so mean to her. And at one point the car is completely engulfed in flames, chasing Buddy down the street before running him over. It's such a cool visual. And later that night, the owner of the garage where Arnie has been keeping Christine sees the car pulling back into the garage, literally looking like a pile of ashes. And when he goes to investigate why the car showed up in that state, climbs inside behind the driver's wheel, and the seat pushes forward until his sternum is crushed. Now, investigators show up the very next day, and Christine is back. to pristine condition. This absolutely feels like a John Carpenter movie to me. I mean, the score is terrific, and it felt like a legitimate horror movie in that final scene. Now, I know one of my minor criticisms about Carrie was it just didn't feel like a horror movie. It was a really good movie, but it didn't feel scary. And there's some legitimately scary scenes to this film. There's something very unsettling here about a car that apparently can't be destroyed being fixated on killing you. I dug the fact that whenever somebody got close to the car that wasn't welcome, an old school 50s type of song would come on that would indicate the mood of the moment. For example, You Keep on Knocking But You Can't Come In. That song's played a couple of times when there's some people getting a little too close, maybe a little too familiar. When Arnie is professing his love for Christine, there is a cheesy love ballad that plays over the radio. I thought that incorporation of old-timey 50s music on Christine's radio was really, really well done. The variation on the timeless tale of nerd ending up with girl at the misfortune of the jock, I like how they turn that on its ear in this one. In here, it's exactly the opposite. Dennis is a star athlete that pines over Lee, and Lee winds up picking the nerdy guy. But by the end of the movie, Lee is standing by the jock as opposed to the nerdy guy. It's a clever little bit of misdirection that I sort of enjoyed. This movie's an 8 out of 10. This is going to age very gracefully for me. I don't understand. I think a lot of it was I grew up on slasher movies. That was horror to me, were slasher movies. Anything else, possessions or demons or anything out of that realm, I didn't really give a lot of attention to. And that was a mistake because I'm learning with some of these other movies that I never gave a chance. There's some really good stuff out there, so it's sort of exciting to delve into it and see what there is. I'm obviously going to go back to the tried and true ones that I know and love, the franchise greats, so to speak, but these little ancillary standalone movies, I'm really starting to dig. And Stephen King's tremendous. I mean, he's got so many great books, so many great miniseries, and obviously the films. You know, we'll get into it at some point. But I thought this movie was very, very good. This is a great 80s movie. There's a lot of great talent in this cast. Everybody plays their role really well. And the way it ends is sort of poetic. This is one I think that anybody should go out of their way to see. The further we get from 1983, the more of a catalog of movies we have to sort of wade through. I think Christine is worth pushing those others to the side and spending an hour and a half with, because it's not a hard watch, and there's some really, really talented people that did a lot of really good work on this movie. So I dug it. You'll dig it too. This is Aging Gracefully. I am Matthew Essex. Thank you so much. See you on the other side.